What's up, everybody? This is Zach from Anglers Escape, and today I wanted to show you all my lures for fishing. So I got a ton of lures in here. I've kind of accumulated these over the years for birthday, Christmas presents, all kinds of things. And basically I'm just going to show you guys the lure, the fish species that they target, and the luck I've had with them. So I'll go ahead and start off here and just start grabbing random lures out of my box. And I'll start from up here, I guess. And right here, there's a lot of hooks everywhere. Here's a longer lure. This is good for walleye, these longer profile ones. They really resemble a minnow. Bass will also take them, of course. I've had fair success on that. I've caught gar on those long profile lures, and I have quite a few other long profile lures in there. Here's kind of your standard crankbait right here. It's got a pretty small bill, so it doesn't go very deep in the water. And you can see it's kind of bit up there. I've caught quite a few bass on that lure right there. Here's a small shad wrap. And these things are really good. I've caught quite a few white bass and crappie on this guy. When I troll the boat along with the trolling motor, just move the boat real slowly with all the poles and line out. And this guy flutters really nicely through the water. Catch a lot of smaller game fish on that lure right there. Here's just kind of a bigger one right here. Let me see if I can get it out. I'll just show you guys right here. This red flat wrap right here. I catch white bass on them and regular largemouth, smallmouth bass on these guys. A lot of people at the local lake also catch walleye on these flat wraps late spring and early summer in the shallows. I got a lot of jigs right here. Here's an electric chicken jig. It's got a little piece of wire here to keep you from snagging the hook on stuff when you're jigging heavy cover like wooded areas. It's got a little bit of flash. This is a really nice jig right here, but I got some more plain jigs I'll show you guys. Here's just kind of a few plain jigs. This is kind of a split tail, a one tail. This is kind of more of a feathery, just using a feather for the tail jig. Different sizes. This is probably like a 1/32 ounce. This might be an ounce jig. The bigger the jig, the faster you can move it. So if they're biting pretty aggressively, you can use a big heavyweight jig. If they're not biting very aggressively, you can use a small jig like this that you just move up and down really slowly. And all those jigs usually just target crappie. Sometimes you'll catch a random bass onto the jig. Here's kind of another. This is kind of a micro jig right here. These work for trout. If you ever go trout fishing, they usually take pretty small baits with pretty small hooks. You could also probably catch crappie on this guy. Here's one you can see I've put a little bit of crappie nibbles on, which is kind of like a bait attractant. Basically, when they grab your bait, when they see all the flash from the jig, they'll grab it, and then there's a longer chance they'll hold on to your jig. If they have that little attractant there, they're less likely to immediately spit it out. Let's see, I got a bunch of swim baits over here. I think I caught these for like $1 each at like Bass Pro or something at one time during a sale. Some of the eyes have fallen out, but they work decent for bass. These are mainly for bass right here. I usually don't catch anything on them but largemouth, smallmouth bass. Pretty good baits. A lot of people put them on the Alabama rig. Here's an Alabama rig. I got 5 for $20 off the internet. Basically this just fans out, and you can cast it, and it'll have like all of these ends will have about one of these swim baits on it, so it looks kind of like a school of smaller bait fish. Might entice large bass. Here's some twister tails right here. These again are good for crappie, and if you jig them for bass in the shallows. I've caught bass on them. Here is a lot more of my crankbaits. Here's another flat shad wrap one. I've caught quite a few big white bass on that. Walleye will take it. Bass, of course, will take it. Largemouth, smallmouth. Here is probably my favorite bass lure. This is a Squarebill, and it really resembles a shad, which is a big game fish, or a big bait fish that these largemouth bass are feeding on in my area. And it's got a really nice wobble to it when it goes to the water, and it's got quite a bit of contrast. It's pretty white. The Squarebill makes it so it stays pretty close to the surface, so you want to fish it in about maybe no deeper than about 8 feet, because it's only going to go about 2 feet under the water when you're fishing it. If you want to go deeper in the water column, like in the hot days of summer, something with a longer bill will dive down deeper, so this guy will go down farther, and it's also I've had decent success with these jointed crankbaits. Got quite a few bass on this one. Again, this is a longer bill, so it goes deeper and it's jointed. It has a rattle in it, so it makes a lot of noise and captures the fish's attention. So I really like these two right here. Here's a lot of spinners. I have a whole bunch. Some don't spin that well, some do spin that well, or do spin pretty well. Here's kind of a package that I got some of these spinners in, and my favorite ones are just Blue Fox spinners. It's $5 for 5 spinners, and I got these at Walmart. Blue Fox, I already took the spinners out of the box, but they always seem to spin really well. I catch a lot of crappie, white bass, largemouth bass, and smallmouth bass. Here's all my plastics, and I don't use plastics a lot, but I do have success with them. Here's just kind of like a little frog. If you're in somewhere with a lot of weeds or lily pads, there's a good chance that the largemouth bass there are feeding on small frogs, so it's a good lure to use. This is a crawfish imitator. So if your area has a lot of like frogs or crawfish or something like that, then you want to kind of use the plastic that goes along with that. Here's a salamander, and I know a guy who swears these are the best bass lure he's ever seen, and they just kind of drop shot them, so they'll have like a little weight here and just bounce them along the bottom up and down and fish them a lot like one of these worms here. And worms are also always a good staple for bass. They're really cheap and they're really effective. Here is a lure for more like musky or walleye. It's got a lot of flash. It's really big. I'd say it's more of a musky lure. I live kind of in the lower Midwest, so there's not a lot of musky or pike around here, so I don't use that too often. Here are some poppers. These are basically float on top of the water, and you basically just move them across the top, making a lot of splash. There's kind of like a little cup here, so when you move it, it pushes out some water, creates like a bunch of motion, and the fish will come up to the surface and hit them. So it's a really cool way to fish because you can really see the fish take the hook, and they're really good in the mornings and the evenings when the fish, or if you see movement on the top of the water, a popper is a good way to go. Got another one right here. These just float. Let's see here. I'll take out some of the things that I have in my main tackle box. I just kind of go through here. Here's a bunch of crankbaits. This smaller, thinner profile I'd use probably more for walleye. This is a good bass one, but the thinner profiles will also work for bass. Here's some skinny dippers. Again, plastics are always cheaper than crankbaits, and they seem to work really effectively. Got a package of salamanders. And this is really good for Alabama rigs. If there's a lot of big bass in the area, these are pretty big baits. Probably catch you stuff over about 3 pounds if they're in the area, and they're good to rig with the Alabama rig. Here's just another standard crankbait. Some more crappie jigs. Let's see here. Here's some little crappie plastics right here. I've had decent success with these. Here's the crappie nibbles I was talking about. These you just kind of tip with the jigs. Like, you don't fish them on just a hook, but you actually put them on the jig, so the crappie will hold on to your jig a little bit longer when they bite it, so you have more time to set the hook. Here's a pretty large swim bait I saw at the store. I haven't tried it out yet, but definitely looks like a shad, gizzard shad, which is a really common bait fish in the area, so I'll have to try that one out. Here's an actual Alabama rig that I already have rigged up, so let me fan it out here for you guys. And basically this resembles a whole school of minnows, and they all just kind of move together. When you're fishing it, you just kind of let it drop up and down. I've caught several fish on the Alabama rigs, but it's a really big profile, so you have to make sure there's big bass in the area. If they're not, you could cast this all day and not catch anything. But when you do find an area with good sized bass, you will catch fish on this. You just won't catch the quantity you would with like the smaller lures, because you're not going to be catching the smaller bass. You're only going to be catching the big ones. Let's see here, another Alabama rig with twister lures. Here's some flukes. These are okay. Crappie jigs. Here's a spinner. Spinners are always nice. They have a lot of flash on really sunny days. Throwing spinners is always a good idea, because you can see here's another spinner right here. This creates a lot of flash right here, and I've caught a fair amount of bass on spinners. Here's some more good swim baits, some more salamanders. Here's another topwater popper. Let's see here. Here's a good spoon. This is more for, I've gone beach fishing before, and spoons work really good for redfish, kingfish, and a lot of other fish in the ocean. Got some more, couple more packs of swim baits. Here's some garlic spray that you can spray on lures. It's kind of like the crappie nibbles, and it's really made for plastic. So if you have like a plastic lure that you want to use, you soak it in this in a little bag overnight, and when they bite your lure, they're more likely to hang on to it like the crappie nibbles. Here's some more swim baits. Here is actually an Alabama rig I've fitted all with jigs for crappie, so it looks kind of like a little school of minnows. And this I've had some success, but not a lot. I think it's too big. I've caught a fair amount of crappie on this, but I think it's a little bit too big for crappie profile wise with these wires. I've noticed a lot of crappie will follow these Alabama rigs with the jigs all the way to the boat and never bite, and I never see that with just a one jig. I think they usually just automatically hit it, but these big profiles they're a little more scared of, even though it attracts them more. Some more plastic worms, and I think that's just about everything, guys. Here's a little, this kind of resembles a rainbow trout. I've caught some rainbow trout on this lure right here. It's got some flash. And, oh yeah, I'll show you guys an up close of the spinners. Spinners are one lure. If I could only have one lure in my tackle box, it'd probably be a spinner. And basically, spinners, I've caught everything on them. I've caught smallmouth, largemouth, white bass, crappie, bluegill, gar, catfish, everything on spinners, and they create a lot of flash. And I think fish see that flash and just have reaction strikes and just strike it. So these are pretty small. So usually the smaller lures, a lot of times you'll catch a lot more fish. They might just not be as big as you want. But spinners are always a good lure to have in the tackle box. And the last lure I have right here is basically just for gar. Sometimes I fish rivers. Gar have really toothy mouths, so it's really hard to hook into with a hook. But here the gar will grab it and their teeth will get all enmeshed in it, and you'll be able to catch some nice sized gar sometimes with just a little rope lure. And there's lots of videos on YouTube on how to make them. But that's basically my setup for all kinds of fish species. I catch walleye, crappie, white bass, largemouth, smallmouth, gar, catfish, all kinds of different things on these lures. And I hope you learned something here today, and good luck fishing.